Now, in chapter 17, we find a series of my favorite arguments, right? And he is pointing out that the reason we finally get into a commonwealth is because we don't want to be at war anymore. And we all kind of knew that. But he wants to point out that the laws of nature in and of themselves are not enough to establish a commonwealth. He points out without the terror of a collective power holding sway over all, fear of one another prevents people from adhering to the laws of nature and to keeping their covenants, Hobbes claims, and covenants without the sword are but words and of no strength to secure men at all, 223. And so the need for a power great enough to ensure our security or to lay out the necessary conditions for peace is clear. Right? So the problem in a state of nature, the reason I can't trust you to live up to your end of the bargain and you can't trust me to live up to my end of the bargain, is because my power and your power are limited. If we come into a disagreement, it's just brawn, it's physical confrontation, right, that we fall back on. And the outcome of such a physical confrontation, it's not clear. Right? I've got no reason to trust you because I can't make you live up to your end of the bargain and vice versa. So, what Hobbes does here is examine three different ways of coming into an association with one another, sharing power. Right? And he points out that, yes, we could join into small groups. Right? It's not just me, but it's me and 5 of my buddies. Right? That come and renegotiate the terms of the contract that you violated with me. Right? But the problem is, I show up and you've got 6 of your buddies there. Right? So we wind up in basically the same insecure position with small numbers because they do not provide enough power. They do not provide enough safety and security. We can think easily enough here about gang wars. Right? Gangs don't provide enough safety and security to really defend the members of their gangs or to really enforce their will over other gangs. Right? Now, the power of sort of a multitude of people without a clear authority is not going to be enough either. In the, what was it, late 90s, I think 98, 99 or so, there was a student uprising at a university in Mexico, right? They felt their rights were being ignored, they weren't getting the sorts of things that they needed from the university, so they rose up and they actually managed to seize the university, right? The state power had no, or the university administration had no power over this group of students for like several weeks. Right? But the thing is, there was nobody in charge. Right? So what Hobbes points out of the power of a multitude without clear authority, if a multitude comes together without a clear leader or command structure, what we get is just a mob, just as likely to turn on itself, and it's also very likely to get absolutely nothing done due to a lack of direction for the application of power. A mob doesn't know what it is, right? Now, this was one of the problems with the race revolt in Detroit. Right? There was no leader, there was no authority structure, and the power, it was just frenzy. Right? Perhaps there were reasons for revolt at the time, right? But it didn't really get anything done because nobody was in charge. They didn't really have a plan or anything that they were doing. It was just frenzy. It's just a mob, right? Hobbes also points out that conditional submission to power is not enough, right? Now, we saw this in World War II, where the Allies came together to confront a threat. As soon as that threat was defeated, not a threat anymore, what happened? Everybody right back at each other's throats. Right? So, what Hobbes points out here, if a multitude submits to one judgment, if Allied command for a limited duration of time for the sake of a crisis, a battle against a common enemy, one campaign for a cause, etc., though the multitude may win the day, mutual interests dissolve as soon as the issue is resolved, and we wind up in the same sort of bleak condition of war of everyone against everyone. Right? So conditional submission to the authority of one not going to be enough to protect us, because we wind up straight back in a state of nature. So each of these, right, does not get us out of this condition of war of everyone against everyone. Right? Now, in one of my favorite passages in this book, what Hobbes points out is that, well, it's really too bad we're not bugs. Bugs seem to, without these artificial agreements, these formal agreements involving reason and speech with one another, they seem to cooperate with one another. Right? Why can they do it, but we can't? What do they have that we don't have? Well, he points out 6 reasons, right, why bugs are better at coming together into societies than we are. Right? First of all, we're in constant competition for honor and dignity. Bugs just do what bugs do. Bugs don't compete with one another that way. Secondly, with bugs, there's no difference between public and private good. What's good for the anthill is good for the ant, and what's good for the ant is what's good for the anthill. Right? But for humans, right, we distinguish between public and private good. What's good for my country might not be good for me. What's good for me might not be what's good for my country. Right? So we make a distinction between public and private good, whereas bugs, they just live a public life completely. Right? 3, bugs don't question authority. They simply do what they're told. But, and we saw this in Socrates, right? Amongst people there are those who think themselves wiser than their leaders, and as a result we have dissension among the ranks and the possibility of civil war even, right? Because people think they know better than the leaders how to run the country. Right? We saw this with the craftsmen in the Socrates in Plato's Apology. Right? Now, number 4, people have words with which to debate the nature of good and evil, and we tend to bicker about it. Remember, good and evil are expressions of appetite and aversion. Right? If I said, Avatar, horrible movie, absolutely horrible, horrible movie, and I don't know how anybody could like it. Unobtainium, blue people, 3D, whoa, it's dumb movie. Right? I would bet that there are some among you that say he doesn't know what he's talking about. And if we were face to face, we would get into an argument about this. Really, the argument would be pointless because I don't like it and you do. Right? We tend to bicker about the nature of good and evil, which are expressions of appetite and aversion. Bugs, they don't have words to do so, and they wouldn't do so either. Bugs just like what they like. They don't like what they don't like. Right? Bugs, interestingly, don't make a distinction between injury and damage. My car is damaged, I fix it. Is that really the case? Or do I say, who the hell hit my car? Right? Bugger, somebody hit my car. That's injury. It's injurious to me. I'm going to have to fix this now. No, you're paying for it, etc., etc. What happens if a tunnel in an anthill collapses? They just rebuild it. Right? There's no distinction between injury and damage, and Hobbes concludes that the agreement between bug and bug is natural. Now, unfortunately, humans, because we're so danged rational and calculating, right, need the provisional agreements of covenants to keep us together. These agreements are artificial or to some extent unnatural, and as such need something besides face value agreement to enforce them. Right? So ultimately, what Hobbes is pointing out here is that we can make these conceptual distinctions between public and private good. We take seriously our categories of good and evil, treating them like they're categories, not like preferences. We make a distinction between injury and damage, and when we're injured, we get all uptight about it. It's because we're so dang rational that we have such a hard time getting along.